The Cellar.
This first story takes place in Massachusetts. An unidentified 54-year-old man who worked a labor-intensive job in construction and had no prior health issues suddenly collapsed inside a McDonald's restaurant and was immediately rushed to the hospital. When arriving at the hospital, the man had lost consciousness, and 24 hours later, he would pass away. So what happened? How does a perfectly healthy 54-year-old just collapse and die? Well, the culprit happens to be something that many people consume and never think twice about the effects it can have on the body. Let's dive into it all. As I stated prior, the man worked a labor-intensive job in construction and had done so for a large portion of his life. Prior to the incident, he had been given a clean bill of health at his doctor's office. On top of working a labor-intensive job, the man would walk his dog numerous times a day with no issue. Now, in digging into the story, I did find that the man didn't have the healthiest eating habits. That was according to his family and his doctor. The man also smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, a long-running habit that isn't good for anyone. Outside of this, the man's only other daily habit was red licorice, an item that he would consume on a daily basis and had consumed for quite some time with no issue. Now, at around 3 weeks prior to the man's untimely demise, he would make a crucial mistake, one that I myself or anyone could make without even giving it a second thought. So what did the man do? Well, he simply switched from a red licorice to a black licorice. Sounds pretty harmless, right? Well, the man consumed roughly 1 to 2 bags of licorice a day. When he made the change to black licorice, he continued the habit, just like he had been doing for quite some time. The only problem with this is that black licorice contains glyceric acid. Glyceric acid is the chief sweet-tasting constituent of Glycyrrhiza glabra root. Structurally, it is a saponin used as an emulsifier and gel-forming agent in foodstuffs and cosmetics. To put it as simply as I can, glyceric acid is widely applied in foods as a natural sweetener. Also medically, the ingredient can be used to positive effect. It has been studied for its medicinal properties. This powerful phytochemical has been proven to reduce body fat, heal stomach ulcers, and fight infections. But in large amounts, glycyrrhizin causes a condition called pseudoaldosteronism, which can cause a person to become overly sensitive to a hormone in the adrenal cortex. This condition can lead to fatigue, high blood pressure, sodium retention, potassium loss, and even heart attacks. As the man began consuming package after package of black licorice, his potassium levels steadily plummeted. As he was standing in that McDonald's restaurant, his potassium levels continued to plummet, which subsequently caused a heart arrhythmia. With his heart acting erratic, the man's body could no longer function as it needed to. The man began shaking, and then he would subsequently collapse and lose consciousness within the restaurant, while onlookers called 911. The ambulance would soon arrive, and they would begin performing CPR before transporting the man to a local hospital. Once at the hospital, doctors were forced to place the man on a ventilator, and he would be admitted to the cardiac ICU. All efforts were soon made to try and save the man, but around 24 hours later, he would die due to cardiac arrest. His body simply couldn't function any longer due to the damage that had been done. Following his death, researchers would put a lot of time and effort into this case, and they would ultimately determine the cause of his death to stem from the black licorice. A candy that each and every one of us could run to the store right now to purchase. Now, most of us don't eat 2 bags of licorice a day, so I'm not telling anyone to stop eating licorice. In fact, in moderation, black licorice can have some positive effects on the body, as I stated before. Just practice moderation, like your life depends on it. Alexandra Yudina was a 23-year-old medical student who lived in Moscow, Russia. She had worked hard and had graduated college, earning her degree as a paramedic doctor. At 23 years young, she had seemingly a ton of life left before her. It was February of 2020. Alexandra and a group of her friends decided to spend an evening dancing, drinking, and overall having a good time at the Killfish Bar in Moscow. As the night progressed, the bar had an eating contest also being held. This eating contest was to have contestants consume 3 choco pies, a chocolate cake with marshmallow filling. According to her friends, Alexandra had no initial intentions in participating in the contest. But as the contest was getting set to begin, Alexandra changed her mind and decided to join in on the festivities. Alexandra, along with the other contestants, would each be given a plate with 3 choco pies. As the contest began, she consumed the first pie with absolute ease. As she looked down at her plate, she decided she would attempt to consume the last 2 pies at the same time in order to get an edge on her competitors. She would then proceed to consume the 2 pies, when she would suddenly stop. She would bring both hands up to her mouth, and then her left hand would begin patting on her chest in an effort to get the large amount of food to go down her throat. Not being able to swallow the food properly, Alexandra would start walking towards the bathroom within the bar. As she proceeded to do so, a photographer continued taking pictures of her and the other contestants. Alexandra would not make it to the bathroom, as she suddenly became unsteady on her feet. A person standing next to her would try to catch her, but she would soon collapse straight to the ground. On the ground, Alexandra would gasp for air, her mouth still full of pie, causing her windpipe to become blocked. Staff at the bar, along with her friends, would rush to her aid, desperately trying to clear her mouth and windpipe so that she could get some much-needed oxygen into her lungs. But no matter how hard they tried, they could not clear her airway. Paramedics would soon be called to the scene. When they arrived, they too made an effort to save her life, but no matter how hard they tried, they could not get her airways to clear. She would be rushed to the hospital, where she would eventually be pronounced dead. In my research into this case, there were some reports that Alexandra had recently been diagnosed with leukemia. There hasn't been any official reporting as to whether or not this is the case, but some outlets reported that with this diagnosis, Alexandra was motivated to live life to the fullest and have as much fun as she could. Whether or not this was what ultimately motivated her to participate in the contest is just not known. Either way, a young, talented 23-year-old lost her life because of a choco pie. What's even further tragic is the fact that the entire event was filmed and subsequently released to the public. Out of respect for her family, I will not play that video. It was 1974 on a rainy Halloween night in Deer Park, Texas. A man named Ronald Clark Bryan was out trick-or-treating with his 2 kids, 8-year-old Timothy and 5-year-old Elizabeth. As the night progressed, one of their neighbors, Jim Bates, and his young son would soon join them. As the group went house to house through the neighborhood, they would soon approach a house with the lights off. The kids would run up to the door and bang on it, but no one would answer. Typically, lights off mean the homeowners are not home, or they simply don't want to participate in the annual Halloween tradition. Once it became clear that no one was coming to the door, the kids began their stroll to the next house on their route. Jim Bates would follow along with the kids as Ronald seemingly hung back on his own. A short while later, as the kids continued collecting candy door to door, Ronald would reappear holding a handful of 21-inch pixie sticks. Pixie sticks are tubes of powdered sour candy. They're basically straight-up tubes of sugar. According to Ronald, the house with the lights off had finally come to the door and provided the ever-sweet candy. Ronald would pass one to each of the kids, who were ecstatic to add the sugary sweet treat to their overall haul of candy. The rest of the night would go on as planned, as the kids would continue going door to door and greeting each homeowner with a warm and welcoming trick or treat. As things grew late, Ronald and the kids parted ways with Jim and began their walk back home. As bedtime approached for the kids, each one was allowed to eat one treat from their haul of candy. 8-year-old Timothy would look through all the delicious treats before he settled on the ever-enticing pixie stick. As Timothy attempted to eat it, he ran into an issue. The sugar was seemingly stuck in the straw. He asked his dad for help, and his dad was able to dislodge the blockage in the pixie stick. Timothy would begin consuming the sugary treat, but as he got his first mouthful down, he turned to his father and complained that it tasted awfully bitter. Timothy's dad ran and grabbed him a cup of Kool-Aid so that Timothy could wash the taste down. As Timothy finished his pixie stick, he subsequently got ready for bed. But it wouldn't be long before his stomach started hurting. Timothy began vomiting and was in excruciating amounts of pain. Before anything could be done, and only 1 hour after eating the pixie stick, Timothy was dead. Following the death of Timothy, an autopsy was done, and the results were shocking. Timothy had succumbed to cyanide poisoning. He had consumed a dose that was big enough to kill 2 people. Following this finding, the police were able to locate and obtain the rest of the pixie sticks. When they did, they found they had been tampered with, and a staple was used to reseal the candy. Luckily, none of the other kids had consumed their pixie sticks at this point. But the police needed to get to the bottom of things. Who had tampered with and given out cyanide? The police would speak with Timothy's father, Ronald, in an effort to find out where the pixie sticks had been acquired. The first walkthrough of the neighborhood yielded no answers, as Ronald claimed he couldn't remember the house or even what the person looked like that had given him the pixie sticks. The police would not give up, though, as they would turn the heat up on Ronald and proceed to walk him around the neighborhood a second time. This time, Ronald was able to point out and give the police a house. The police would soon locate the homeowner at his place of work, placing him in handcuffs and bringing him into the police station. At the time, it appeared that the case had been solved, but upon interviewing the man in custody, it came to light that he had a solid alibi. The man had been working that night, and according to reports, his wife had been home, but had ran out of candy. Upon running out, she turned off the lights and stopped answering the door. So if this man had not tampered with the candy, then who did? Well, it wouldn't take the cops long to put the pieces together. The police soon discovered that Ronald had recently taken out life insurance policies on both of his children. Furthering suspicion, Ronald owed over $100,000 in debt, and it was discovered that the morning after Timothy had died, Ronald had called the life insurance policy at 9 a.m. Following these revelations, the police were able to obtain a search warrant for Ronald's house. There they found a pair of scissors. The scissors had a plastic residue on them that was similar to the pixie sticks. Further investigation found that Ronald had recently asked one of his professors at college about which poison being the most effective. On top of this, a man who worked at a local chemical factory had remembered seeing a man wearing blue scrubs who had stopped in to inquire about purchasing cyanide. Ronald was an optician, and that was exactly what he would have been wearing for work. Ultimately, the man was unable to identify Ronald, but the police felt like they had enough to arrest and take Ronald to trial. On June 3rd of 1975, a jury found Ronald to be guilty of capital murder, as well as 4 accounts of attempted murder. Ronald was ultimately sentenced to death. It would end up taking around 9 years, but in March of 1984, Ronald was finally executed by lethal injection. How a man could do something like that to his own child, I simply could never understand. My condolences go out to all the families and friends of those in today's stories. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps the channel continue to grow. Also, you can check the description box below and find the link to my merch store. Tons of awesome designs, and the proceeds help fund the channel. For those of you that are interested, I have a Cellar Dwellers membership tier for the channel. It's $2.99 a month and comes with some pretty cool perks, so if that interests you, then please go check it out. I also have that linked in the description box below. If you'd like to submit a real-life scary story that you would like featured on an episode on the channel, please do so using the email linked in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything that you do to support the channel is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.